Maya Chen pressed her palm against the ornate iron gate, its cold metal sending shivers up her arm, despite the warm September evening. The Victorian mansion loomed before her like something from a Gothic nightmare, 3 stories of weathered stone and towering spires that seemed to pierce the darkening sky. Gargoyles perched on the corners of the building, their stone eyes following her every movement with unsettling intensity. At 25, Maya had seen her share of rundown apartments and questionable living situations, but nothing quite like this. The mansion stood isolated on the outskirts of Salem, Massachusetts, surrounded by ancient oak trees, whose gnarled branches created twisted shadows across the overgrown grounds. A wrought iron fence enclosed the property, its spear-like points gleaming menacingly in the fading light. $300 a month, she whispered to herself, still unable to believe the rental price. In a city where studio apartments cost more than most people's salaries, this seemed too good to be true. There has to be a catch. Maya's financial situation had become desperate over the past month. Her gallery showing, the one she'd spent 2 years preparing for, had fallen through when the gallery owner suddenly decided to feature his nephew's abstract sculptures instead. Her savings account, never substantial to begin with, had dwindled to double digits. The final blow came when her ex-boyfriend Marcus kicked her out of their shared apartment, claiming he needed space to find himself with his 22-year-old yoga instructor. This mansion, despite its obvious age and isolation, was her only option. The landlord's email had been brief and oddly formal, written in an old-fashioned style that seemed to belong to another century. He'd agreed to rent to her sight unseen, requiring only first month's rent and no security deposit. The only condition was that she move in immediately. The key turned easily in the heavy oak door, which swung open with a prolonged creak that echoed through the marble foyer like a mournful sigh. Maya stepped inside, her art supplies clutched in one hand, a single battered suitcase in the other. The interior took her breath away, not just because of its grandeur, but because of how perfectly preserved everything appeared. Dust motes danced in the fading sunlight that streamed through massive stained glass windows, casting rainbow patterns across the polished marble floor. The foyer alone was larger than her previous apartment, with a curved staircase that swept upward like something from a fairy tale. Crystal chandeliers hung from the coffered ceiling, their faceted surfaces catching and reflecting the colored light in dazzling displays. "Hello," she called out, her voice bouncing off the high ceilings and disappearing into the depths of the house. "Mr. Blackthorne." Silence answered her, broken only by the distant ticking of what sounded like multiple clocks. The landlord had said he'd meet her here at sunset, but perhaps he'd been delayed. Maya set down her belongings and began exploring, her footsteps echoing on the polished marble despite her attempts to move quietly. The mansion was a maze of interconnected rooms, each more opulent than the last. A library with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves filled with leather-bound volumes, their spines bearing titles in languages she couldn't identify. A music room dominated by a magnificent grand piano, its ebony surface so perfectly polished she could see her reflection in it. A dining room with a table that could easily seat 20, set with china so delicate it looked like it might shatter if she breathed on it too hard. Everything was perfectly preserved, as if frozen in time. There was no dust, no signs of neglect, yet the house felt empty in a way that suggested it had been uninhabited for decades. The silence was almost oppressive, broken only by the occasional settling of old wood and the whisper of wind through the eaves. As she climbed the curved staircase to the second floor, Maya felt an odd sensation prickling at the back of her neck, like someone was watching her. She paused on the landing, looking back down at the empty foyer. The feeling was so strong she could almost sense a presence, but when she called out again, only her own voice echoed back. "Just nerves," she murmured, continuing upward. The hallway stretched before her, lined with portraits of stern-faced men and women in period dress. Their painted eyes seemed to follow her as she walked, and she quickened her pace, eager to reach the master bedroom at the end of the hall. The master bedroom was everything the landlord had promised and more. The double doors stood slightly ajar, revealing a room that belonged in a palace rather than a private home. The four-poster bed was draped in midnight blue silk that seemed to shimmer in the fading light. Antique furniture filled the space, an ornate wardrobe that looked like it could hide entire worlds. a vanity table with an oval mirror framed in silver, and French doors leading to a balcony that overlooked the mansion's extensive gardens. Maya pushed open the French doors and stepped onto the balcony, gasping at the view. The gardens stretched as far as she could see, a carefully planned landscape of winding paths, ornate fountains and flower beds that seemed to glow in the twilight. Ancient trees formed natural archways, and she could make out the silhouette of what looked like a greenhouse in the distance. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Maya spun around, her heart hammering against her ribs. A man stood in the bedroom doorway, tall and lean, with dark hair that seemed to absorb the light around it. His pale blue eyes were the most striking feature in a face that could have been carved by a Renaissance master. He was dressed in an expensive black suit that seemed perfectly tailored to his athletic frame, and when he moved, it was with a fluid grace that reminded her of a dancer or a predator. "I'm sorry," she stammered, pressing a hand to her chest to calm her racing heart. "I didn't hear you come in. Are you Mr. Blackthorne?" He smiled, revealing perfect white teeth that seemed to gleam in the dim light. "Please call me Damien, and you must be Maya Chen, the artist." There was something about his voice that made her skin tingle, smooth as aged whiskey with just a hint of an accent she couldn't place. Old world, perhaps. European. When he spoke her name, it sounded like poetry. "Yes, that's me." She extended her hand, and when he took it, she was surprised by how cold his skin was. His touch sent an electric shock up her arm, and she had to resist the urge to pull away. "Thank you so much for renting to me on such short notice. I know my credit isn't perfect, and my references are unnecessary," Damien interrupted gently, his thumb brushing across her knuckles before he released her hand. "I have a good feeling about you, Miss Chen. This house has been empty for too long. It needs life, creativity." His pale eyes lingered on her face with an intensity that made her feel exposed, as if he could see straight through to her soul. "It needs someone like you." Maya felt heat rise in her cheeks under his scrutiny. There was something almost hypnotic about the way he looked at her, as if she were the most fascinating thing he'd encountered in years. It was flattering and unsettling in equal measure. "The rent seems too good to be true," she said, trying to regain her composure and ignore the way her pulse quickened whenever he looked at her. "Are you sure there isn't some mistake? I mean, a place like this in Salem should cost 10 times what you're asking." Damien's smile faltered for just a moment, and she caught a glimpse of something darker in his expression. Pain, perhaps, or regret. "No mistake, though I should warn you, this house has history. Some might call it haunted." "Haunted?" Maya laughed nervously, the sound echoing strangely in the large room. "You mean like ghosts and things that go bump in the night?" "Something like that." His expression grew serious, and she noticed how the shadows seemed to deepen around him. "If that troubles you—" "No," Maya said quickly, not wanting to lose this opportunity. "I don't believe in ghosts. Besides, I'm an artist. A little atmosphere might be inspiring." "Good." Damien's smile returned, but it seemed forced now, not quite reaching his eyes. "There is one rule, however. The 3rd floor is off limits. It's structurally unsound." Maya nodded, though something in his tone suggested there was more to it than safety concerns. The way he said it, with such finality, made her wonder what he was really trying to keep her away from. "I'll show you around properly tomorrow evening," Damien continued, moving toward the door with that same fluid grace. "For now, make yourself at home. The kitchen is fully stocked, and there's a studio space in the east wing that might suit your artistic needs. Tomorrow evening? Not during the day?" Damien paused at the doorway, his hand resting on the ornate doorframe. In the dim light, his skin looked almost translucent, and for a moment Maya could have sworn she saw something otherworldly in his pale eyes. "I keep unusual hours, Miss Chen. I hope that won't be a problem." Before Maya could respond, he was gone, his footsteps fading down the hallway with supernatural quiet. She stood alone in the master bedroom, her heart still racing from their encounter. There was something about Damien Blackthorne that both attracted and unsettled her, a magnetism that seemed to pull at something deep in her chest, combined with an underlying danger that made her instincts scream warnings she couldn't quite understand. As night fell over the mansion, Maya unpacked her few belongings and explored more of her new home. The studio Damien had mentioned was everything she could have dreamed of. a large, airy room with floor-to-ceiling windows that would provide excellent natural light during the day. Someone had thoughtfully provided easels, a pallet table, and storage for her supplies. She set up her current painting, a landscape she'd been working on for weeks, and lost herself in the familiar rhythm of brush against canvas. The painting was one of her more experimental pieces, a forest scene that seemed to shift and change depending on the light. In daylight, it appeared to be a peaceful woodland glade, but as shadows fell across the canvas, the trees seemed to twist into more sinister shapes, and what had looked like dappled sunlight began to resemble watching eyes. It was past midnight when she heard the piano. The melody drifted up from the music room below, hauntingly beautiful and melancholy. Maya set down her brush and crept to the top of the stairs, listening. The music was unlike anything she'd ever heard, complex and emotional, as if the pianist was pouring their very soul into the keys. Each note seemed to resonate in her chest, awakening feelings she couldn't name. The piece was clearly classical, but with modern variations that spoke of a musician with both technical skill and deep emotional understanding. Whoever was playing had lived through pain, she realized. The music carried the weight of loss, of longing, of love that had been denied or destroyed. Curiosity overcoming caution, she descended the stairs and followed the sound to the music room. The doors were closed, but golden light spilled from beneath them, warm and inviting. Maya pressed her ear to the polished wood, the music washing over her like a physical force. It was so beautiful it brought tears to her eyes. When the last note faded into silence, she waited, holding her breath. The silence stretched on, broken only by the distant ticking of clocks and the whisper of wind through the eaves. After several minutes, she gently pushed open the door. The room was empty. The piano bench was tucked neatly under the keyboard, and there was no sign that anyone had been there. But when Maya approached the instrument, she could feel warmth radiating from the keys, and the air still seemed to vibrate with the lingering echoes of the music. "Strange," she whispered, running her fingers over the keys. They were warm to the touch, as if someone had just been playing. "What's strange?" Maya whirled around, her heart leaping into her throat. A man stood in the doorway, and for a moment she thought Damien had returned. But as her eyes adjusted to the dim light, she realized this wasn't quite right. The man looked exactly like Damien, but there were subtle differences that became more apparent the longer she looked. His hair was slightly longer, falling in waves that caught the light differently. His clothes were more casual, dark jeans and a grey sweater that looked expensive but comfortable. And his eyes, while the same pale blue as Damien's, held a sadness that seemed to run soul deep, as if he carried the weight of the world on his shoulders. "I'm sorry," he said, stepping into the room with movements that were somehow both graceful and hesitant. "I didn't mean to startle you. I'm Adrian." "Adrian?" Maya's mind raced, trying to process this new development. "Are you related to Damien?" A shadow crossed his features, and for a moment his form seemed to flicker like candlelight in a breeze. "You could say that. We're twins." "Twins." Maya studied his face, noting the identical bone structure, the same aristocratic features. But where Damien radiated confidence and barely contained power, Adrian seemed almost fragile, as if he might disappear at any moment. "He didn't mention he had a brother. Damien doesn't like to talk about me." Adrian moved to the piano, his fingers hovering over the keys without quite touching them. "We have, a complicated relationship." There was something in his voice, a loneliness that resonated deep in Maya's chest and made her want to reach out to him. She found herself stepping closer, drawn by an inexplicable need to comfort this beautiful, sad man. "Were you the one playing?" she asked softly. Adrian nodded, his expression growing distant. "Music is one of the few things that brings me peace anymore. It's a way to express what words cannot." It was beautiful, heartbreaking but beautiful. Maya moved closer to the piano, studying his profile in the golden light. "Have you been playing long?" "Longer than you might imagine." Adrian's lips curved in a sad smile that made her heart ache. "What about you? Damien mentioned you're an artist." "Trying to be." Maya gestured toward the stairs, where her studio waited. "I've set up a workspace upstairs, mostly landscapes, some portraits, nothing as moving as your music." I'd like to see your work sometime if you wouldn't mind. The request was simple, but the way he said it, with such genuine interest and hope, made Maya's heart skip. I'd like that very much. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, the air between them charged with an energy Maya couldn't quite name. Adrian was watching her with the same intensity as his brother, but where Damien's gaze had felt penetrating and almost predatory, Adrian's felt understanding, as if he could see into her soul and accepted everything he found there. I should let you get some rest, Adrian said finally, though he seemed reluctant to leave. It's late and you must be tired from your move. Will I see you tomorrow? Something flickered in his eyes, pain perhaps, or regret. Perhaps. I tend to keep to myself during the day. The sunlight and I don't agree. Like your brother. Yes, Adrian said quietly, his voice carrying a weight of meaning she didn't understand. Like my brother. He moved toward the door, then paused, looking back at her with an expression of such longing it took her breath away. Maya. Yes? Be careful in this house. Not everything is as it seems. His form seemed to waver for a moment, becoming translucent before solidifying again. And if you ever feel afraid, call for Damien, he'll protect you. Before she could ask what he meant, Adrian was gone, leaving Maya alone with the lingering scent of sandalwood and winter air, and the echo of his warning ringing in her ears. The next few days fell into a strange but comfortable rhythm that Maya found herself looking forward to with increasing anticipation. She would spend her mornings painting in the studio, losing herself in color and light as the sun streamed through the large windows. The mansion's atmosphere was indeed inspiring. She found herself creating some of her best work, landscapes that seemed to pulse with life and emotion, portraits that captured not just physical features, but the essence of her subjects' souls. There was something about the house itself that seemed to feed her creativity, the play of light and shadow through the ancient windows, the way the walls seemed to hold echoes of centuries of human emotion, the sense of history that permeated every room. It all combined to create an environment where her artistic vision flourished like never before. Damien would appear each evening, just as the sun set, always impeccably dressed in expensive suits that looked like they'd been tailored by master craftsmen. He moved through the house with the confidence of someone who belonged there completely, yet there was always an air of formality about him, as if he were playing a role rather than simply being himself. He would bring her dinner, elaborate meals that seemed to come from nowhere, served on fine china with crystal glasses and silver cutlery. The food was always perfectly prepared, restaurant quality, though Maya never saw any evidence of cooking or delivery. When she asked about it, Damien would smile mysteriously and change the subject. You've traveled extensively, she observed one evening as they sat in the library, a fire crackling in the ornate fireplace. The room was lined with books in dozens of languages, their leather bindings gleaming in the firelight. You could say that. Damien poured wine from a bottle that looked ancient, its label written in script she couldn't read. I've had time to see the world. What do you do for work? I mean, to afford all this? Maya gestured around the opulent room, taking in the priceless artwork, the antique furniture, the obvious wealth that surrounded them. Damien's hand stilled on the wine bottle, and for a moment his carefully composed expression slipped. Family money. Old investments that have compounded over time. There was something evasive in his tone, but before Maya could press further, he was asking about her art, her dreams, her past. He was an excellent listener, hanging on her every word as if she were the most fascinating person he'd ever met. His attention was intoxicating, making her feel special and valued in a way she'd never experienced. But it was Adrian who truly captivated her heart and imagination. He appeared only at night, always when Damien was absent, as if the two brothers were deliberately avoiding each other. Sometimes she would find him in the music room, playing melodies that made her heart ache with their beauty and pain. Other times, he would visit her studio, studying her paintings with an artist's eye, and offering insights that showed a deep understanding of both technique and emotion. You capture more than just the physical world, he said one night, standing before her latest work, a stormy seascape that seemed to churn with inner turmoil. The waves appeared to move in the flickering candlelight, and the storm clouds seemed pregnant with unspoken emotion. This isn't just a landscape, it's a feeling, a state of being. That's what I try to do, Maya said, pleased by his understanding. Most people looked at her work and saw only pretty pictures, missing the deeper emotional currents that drove her art. I want to paint not just what I see, but what I feel. I see pain in this piece, Adrian said softly, his pale eyes reflecting the turbulent colors of the painting. And hope. The storm is fierce, but there's light breaking through the clouds. You believe that even the darkest moments can give way to something beautiful. Maya looked at him in surprise, her heart racing at his perceptive analysis. How did you... That's exactly what I was feeling when I painted it. I was thinking about my life, about how everything seemed to be falling apart, but maybe that was just making room for something better. Adrian turned to her, his pale eyes intense in the candlelight. Perhaps we understand each other's pain because we've both learned that sometimes we must be broken before we can be remade into something stronger. The comment hung between them, heavy with meaning and unspoken understanding. Maya found herself stepping closer, drawn by the sadness that seemed to emanate from him like a physical force. There was something about Adrian that called to the deepest parts of her soul, a recognition that went beyond physical attraction to something more fundamental. "What happened to you?" she whispered, reaching out tentatively to touch his cheek. For a moment, she thought he might answer. His lips parted, and she saw such longing in his expression that it took her breath away. But then he stepped back, the moment broken, his form seeming to waver like heat shimmer. "Some stories are too painful to tell," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Some wounds never heal, no matter how much time passes." As the days passed, Maya found herself caught between two worlds, two brothers who couldn't have been more different despite their identical faces. Damien was warmth and protection, making her feel safe and cherished. When he looked at her, she felt beautiful and desired. When he spoke to her, she felt intelligent and interesting. He had a way of making her feel like she was the center of his universe. Adrian was mystery and understanding, making her feel seen in a way she'd never experienced. When he looked at her, she felt understood down to her very soul. When he spoke to her, she felt like he was sharing pieces of himself that he'd never shown anyone else. He had a way of making her feel like they were two halves of the same broken whole. But there was something deeply strange about their arrangement that became more apparent with each passing day. She never saw the brothers together. When she asked Damien about Adrian, his expression would darken, and he would grow distant and evasive. "My brother is complicated," he would say, his jaw tightening with what looked like pain. "It's better if you don't get too involved with him. He's not stable." When she asked Adrian about Damien, he would grow distant, almost ghostly, his form seeming to fade around the edges. "Damien has his own path to walk," Adrian would reply, his voice carrying a weight of sadness that made her heart ache. "As do I. Our roads diverged long ago." It was during her second week in the mansion that Maya began to notice other oddities that she couldn't explain away as quirks or eccentricities. Damien could move through the house without making a sound, appearing and disappearing like smoke. She would turn around and find him standing behind her, though she'd heard no footsteps. He never ate the elaborate meals he brought her, claiming he'd already dined, though she never saw any evidence of when or where. And sometimes when the light hit him just right, he seemed almost translucent, as if he weren't entirely solid. She would catch glimpses of this in her peripheral vision, but when she looked directly at him, he appeared completely normal. Adrian, too, had his peculiarities that became more pronounced the longer she knew him. He was always cold to the touch, his skin like polished marble. When she tried to take his picture with her phone, the image would come out completely blank, as if he weren't there at all. He cast no reflection in the antique mirrors that lined the hallways, though she only noticed this when she wasn't looking directly at him. Most strangely, he seemed to have difficulty with physical objects. She would watch him reach for a book or a glass, and his hand would pass right through it before he seemed to concentrate and become solid enough to grasp it. When she asked about it, he would grow evasive and change the subject. "There's something you're not telling me," Maya said to Damien one evening as they walked through the mansion's extensive garden. The moon was full, casting everything in silver light that made the landscape look otherworldly. Ancient statues stood sentinel among the carefully tended flower beds, their faces worn smooth by centuries of weather. Damien stopped beside a fountain topped with a stone angel, its face turned skyward as if seeking divine intervention. In the moonlight, his pale skin seemed to glow with an inner light. "What do you mean?" he asked, though his tone suggested he knew exactly what she was talking about. "About you. About Adrian. About this house." Maya turned to face him, studying his perfect features in the silver light. "I'm not stupid, Damien. I know something supernatural is happening here. The way you both move, the way you appear and disappear, the way Adrian seems to flicker sometimes." Damien was quiet for a long moment, his pale eyes reflecting the moonlight like mirrors. When he spoke, his voice was heavy with centuries of weariness and pain. "You're right. There are things I haven't told you, things I hoped I wouldn't have to explain." He sat on the fountain's edge, suddenly looking older than his apparent 30 years, as if the weight of time itself was pressing down on his shoulders. "What do you know about vampires, Maya?" Maya's breath caught in her throat, her heart beginning to race. "Vampires? You mean like blood-drinking immortal vampires, creatures of the night?" "The very same." "That's impossible. They're just stories, legends created to explain things people didn't understand." "Are they?" Damien stood, moving with inhuman grace that no mortal could achieve. As Maya watched in shock, his canine teeth elongated into gleaming fangs, and his eyes began to glow with an otherworldly light that seemed to come from within. "I am 312 years old, Maya. I was turned during the French Revolution, when I was barely older than you are now." Maya stumbled backward, her heart hammering against her ribs as her mind struggled to process what she was seeing. "This is insane." "You're insane. Vampires don't exist." "I know how it sounds," Damien said, his fangs retracting and his appearance returning to normal. "But you asked for the truth, and I'm giving it to you. I am a vampire, Maya. I have been for over 3 centuries. "And Adrian?" Maya's voice was barely a whisper, though part of her already knew the answer. Pain flashed across Damien's features, so intense it made her want to reach out and comfort him. "Adrian was my twin brother. We were turned together by the same vampire on the same night. For over a century, we were inseparable, bound by blood and shared immortality." "Was?" Damien closed his eyes, as if the memory was too painful to bear while looking at her. 100 years ago, we were hunted by a group of vampire slayers, humans who had dedicated their lives to destroying our kind. They cornered us in an old cathedral in Prague, armed with wooden stakes and holy water and all the tools of our destruction. His voice broke, and Maya saw tears glistening in his eyes when he opened them again. "Adrian." Damien's voice was barely audible. "Adrian sacrificed himself to save me. He threw himself between me and a wooden stake meant for my heart. The stake pierced his chest instead, and he crumbled to dust in my arms." Maya felt the world tilt around her, her legs suddenly weak. "He died?" "Yes." Damien's voice was thick with grief that had clearly never healed. "But his spirit, it never left me. For a century, I've felt his presence, heard his voice in the wind, seen his shadow in my peripheral vision. I thought I was going mad with grief and guilt." "But I've seen him," Maya said frantically, her mind racing to make sense of this impossible revelation. "I've talked to him, touched him, because you're a medium." Damien's voice was filled with wonder and something that might have been hope. "You have the ability to see and interact with spirits, to bridge the gap between the world of the living and the realm of the dead. Adrian's ghost has been with me all this time, but I could never truly see him, never speak with him, until you came." Maya sank onto a stone bench, her mind reeling as pieces of the impossible puzzle began to fall into place. "This is impossible. Ghosts, vampires, none of this is real." "Isn't it?" Damien knelt before her, taking her hands in his cold ones. "Haven't you felt it? The way Adrian seems to fade in bright light. The way he never eats, never sleeps. The way he can only appear at night, and even then only when the conditions are right. Maya thought of all the strange moments, the inconsistencies she'd dismissed as quirks or imagination. Adrian's sadness, his warnings about the house, the way he sometimes seemed to flicker like candlelight in a breeze, the way her camera couldn't capture his image, the way he cast no reflection. "He's really dead?" she whispered, tears beginning to spill down her cheeks. "His body is," Damien said gently, "but his soul. His soul is trapped between worlds, unable to move on because he believes he failed to protect me. He's been carrying that guilt for 100 years. That's why he's so sad," Maya realized, her heart breaking for the beautiful, tormented man she'd come to care for so deeply. "He thinks he let you down, when he's the one who saved me." Damien's voice was thick with guilt and self-recrimination. "I've spent a century trying to find a way to speak with him, to tell him that his sacrifice wasn't in vain, that I've lived these 100 years because of his love and courage. And then you came, and suddenly he was there, as real as life. What does this mean?" Maya asked, her voice small and lost. "For us? For him? For any of this?" Damien's expression grew pained, and she could see the conflict warring in his pale eyes. "I don't know. I only know that for the first time in 100 years, I can see my brother's face, hear his voice, watch him smile, and it's because of you." That night, Maya lay in the four-poster bed staring at the ceiling, her mind churning with everything Damien had revealed. The man she was falling for was a vampire. The other man she was falling for was a ghost. Her life had become something out of a Gothic novel, and she wasn't sure whether to laugh or cry. When she finally drifted off to sleep, her dreams were filled with images of two brothers, one living, one dead, both bound by love and tragedy that spanned centuries. She woke to the sound of piano music drifting up from below, more urgent and desperate than she'd ever heard it. Without hesitation, she threw on a silk robe and hurried downstairs to the music room, her bare feet silent on the marble floors. Adrian sat at the piano, his fingers dancing across the keys with ethereal grace. But tonight was different. His form seemed more solid, more present, and the melody he played was not melancholy but urgent, almost desperate. "Adrian," Maya said softly as she entered the room. He stopped playing and turned to her, his pale eyes luminous in the moonlight streaming through the tall windows. There was something different about him tonight, a solidity, a presence that hadn't been there before. "You know," he said simply, "and it wasn't a question, Damien told me." Maya approached slowly as if he might vanish at any moment. "About what you are, what happened in Prague." Adrian's laugh was bitter, filled with a century of pain and regret. "What I am, I'm nothing, Maya. A shadow, a memory that refuses to fade into the peace of oblivion." "You're not nothing." Maya sat beside him on the piano bench, close enough to feel the chill that emanated from his ghostly form. "You're the most real person I've ever met." "Real?" Adrian's voice cracked with emotion. "I'm dead, Maya. I've been dead for 100 years. I'm a ghost, a spirit trapped between worlds by my own guilt and failure. But you're here, you're with me." Maya reached out tentatively, her fingers brushing his cheek. He felt solid, real though cold as winter morning. That has to count for something. Adrian closed his eyes at her touch, leaning into her palm like a man dying of thirst who'd finally found water. "You don't understand what you're saying. I'm a ghost, bound to this world by guilt and regret and the inability to let go. I have nothing to offer you but sorrow and pain." "You offer me understanding," Maya said fiercely, her heart breaking at the self-hatred in his voice. "You see me, really see me, in a way no one ever has. You understand my art, my dreams, the parts of myself I've never been able to share with anyone else. Dead or alive, that matters more than anything. And Damien." Adrian's eyes opened, fixing on hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "He's alive, Maya. He can give you a future, children, a real life filled with joy and possibility. I can give you nothing but darkness and the cold touch of death." Maya felt her heart breaking as she looked into his beautiful, tormented face. Don't you think I should be the one to decide what I want, what I need? Before Adrian could respond, a new voice cut through the air like a blade. How touching, a love triangle between the living, the dead, and the merely human. Maya spun around to find a woman standing in the doorway, tall and elegant, with platinum blonde hair that seemed to glow in the moonlight and eyes like chips of Arctic ice. She was beautiful in a cold, predatory way that made Maya's skin crawl and her instincts scream danger. "Celeste," Adrian breathed, his face going even paler than usual. "Hello, darling." The woman, Celeste, smiled, revealing fangs that gleamed like ivory daggers. "Did you miss me? It's been far too long since we've had a proper chat." "What are you doing here?" Adrian stood, moving protectively in front of Maya with a speed that defied physics. "I came to collect what's mine, of course." Celeste's gaze fixed on Maya with hungry interest, like a predator studying its prey. "Though I must say I'm impressed. A medium powerful enough to give a ghost physical form. How deliciously rare. You'll be quite useful." "Leave her out of this," Adrian snarled, his form flickering with emotion. "Oh, but she's the whole point, isn't she?" Celeste glided into the room with predatory grace, her movements too fluid to be entirely human. "You see, my dear," she addressed Maya directly, "Adrian and Damien were mine long before they were turned. I was their sire, their creator, their maker, and when Adrian died I lost half of my collection." Maya felt ice forming in her veins as understanding began to dawn. "Collection?" "Vampire twins are incredibly rare," Celeste explained, circling them like a shark, scenting blood in the water. "Their bond transcends death itself, creates power that can be harvested and used. I've spent a century trying to find a way to bring Adrian back, to complete my set and claim the power that should rightfully be mine." "That's impossible," Maya said, though her voice shook with fear. "The dead can't be brought back to life." Celeste's smile widened, revealing more of her gleaming fangs. "Not usually, no. But with the right medium, the right sacrifice, the right combination of love and death and desperate need." Her eyes glittered with malice and ancient hunger. "A life for a life, as they say. Your life force, channeled through your medium abilities, would be more than enough to restore Adrian to full vampiric life." Understanding crashed over Maya like a cold wave, stealing her breath and making her legs weak. "You want me to die, to trade my life for his." Such a clever girl. Celeste clapped her hands together in mock delight. "Your life force, combined with your natural medium abilities, would be more than enough to restore Adrian to exactly what he was before, immortal, powerful, and mine to command for eternity." "No." Adrian stepped closer to Maya, his form flickering with desperate emotion. "I won't let you hurt her. I'll find a way to stop you." "You can't stop me, darling. You're dead, remember?" Celeste's laugh was like breaking glass, sharp and cutting. "Besides, wouldn't you like to be alive again? To feel blood flowing through your veins? To touch your precious Maya without the barrier of death between you?" Maya saw the longing flash across Adrian's face before he could hide it, the desperate desire to live again, to be real, to have a chance at the life that had been stolen from him a century ago. "Think about it," Celeste continued, her voice taking on a hypnotic quality. "You could have everything you've ever wanted. Life, love, eternity with the woman who sees you so clearly. All it would cost is one insignificant human life. At the cost of her life," Adrian said firmly, though Maya could hear the struggle in his voice. "Never. I would rather remain a ghost for eternity than cause her harm." How noble, how utterly predictable. Celeste's expression hardened, her beautiful features taking on a cruel cast. "But I'm afraid you don't have a choice in the matter. The ritual can be performed with or without your cooperation." She raised her hand, and Maya felt an invisible force seize her, lifting her off the ground with supernatural strength. Pain shot through her body as Celeste began to draw out her life force, preparing to channel it into Adrian's ghostly form. "Stop!" Adrian lunged forward, but his incorporeal form passed right through the vampire like mist through air. "Adrian!" Maya gasped, struggling against the supernatural bonds, holding her suspended in mid-air. It was then that Damien burst into the room, his eyes blazing with fury that seemed to light the very air around him. "Let her go, Celeste." Damien, Celeste purred, not releasing her supernatural hold on Maya. How wonderful to see you again, my beautiful boy. Still playing the hero, I see. Some things never change. I said let her go. Damien's voice carried the weight of centuries, power radiating from him like heat from a forge. His eyes had taken on that otherworldly glow, and Maya could see his fangs gleaming in the moonlight. Or what? Celeste's grip on Maya tightened, making her cry out in pain as more of her life force was drained away. You'll destroy me. We both know you don't have the strength to face me alone. I made you, remember? I know every weakness, every limitation of your power. He's not alone. Adrian's voice rang out with newfound power that seemed to shake the very foundations of the mansion. Maya watched in amazement as his ghostly form began to solidify, becoming more real, more present than she'd ever seen him. The air around him shimmered with energy, and for the first time since she'd known him, he looked truly alive. Impossible, Celeste breathed, her concentration wavering enough that Maya felt the bonds holding her weaken slightly. You're dead. You've been dead for a century. Death is just another state of being, Adrian said, his form now solid enough to cast a clear shadow on the marble floor. And love. Love transcends all boundaries, even those between life and death. Maya felt the supernatural bonds holding her weaken further as Celeste's attention focused entirely on Adrian. She managed to drop to the ground, gasping for air, as her life force slowly returned to her. How are you doing this? Celeste demanded, her beautiful face twisted with confusion and growing fear. Maya's power, Adrian explained, his eyes never leaving the vampire who had created and tormented them. Her ability to bridge the gap between life and death, combined with something even more powerful, the love that binds us together. Damien moved to Maya's side, helping her to her feet with gentle hands. Are you all right? Maya nodded, though she felt drained as if part of her essence had been pulled away. I'm fine, but Adrian is more powerful than any of us realized, Damien finished, wonder in his voice as he watched his brother. Touching, Celeste snarled, her composure finally cracking. But it changes nothing. I will have what's mine, what I've spent a century searching for. She lunged forward with inhuman speed, her claws extended toward Maya's throat. But Adrian was faster. His ghostly form intercepted her attack, and for the first time in a century, he was solid enough to make real, physical contact. The two supernatural beings crashed into the grand piano, sending a discordant crash of notes through the air that seemed to echo through the entire mansion. Celeste's eyes widened in shock as Adrian's hands closed around her throat, with very real, very solid strength. You're solid, she gasped, her voice strained. Solid enough, Adrian replied grimly, his grip tightening. But the effort was taking its toll. Maya could see him flickering, his form becoming translucent as he struggled to maintain physical coherence while fighting a vampire of Celeste's age and power. Adrian, she called out, instinctively reaching toward him. The moment her hand touched his shoulder, power flowed between them like electricity. Adrian's form solidified completely, his strength returning tenfold as Maya's medium abilities anchored him to the physical world. The bond, Damien breathed in wonder, understanding dawning in his pale eyes. Maya, you're not just seeing him, you're anchoring him to this world through the power of your connection. Celeste broke free from Adrian's grip, stumbling backward with fear, now clearly visible in her ancient eyes. This is impossible. A ghost cannot become solid without the proper ritual, without sacrifice. Love is its own ritual, Maya said, understanding flooding through her as she felt the connection between herself and Adrian strengthen. Adrian isn't trapped here by guilt or regret. He's here because he chooses to be, because we choose to be together. Sentimental nonsense, Celeste spat. But there was desperation in her voice now. Love cannot overcome the laws of death itself. Can't it? Adrian stepped forward, his hand finding Maya's and intertwining their fingers. The moment their skin touched, light began to emanate from their joined hands, warm and golden and filled with power that seemed to come from the very essence of their connection. For 100 years, I believed I was bound to this world by failure, by the guilt of leaving Damien alone. But I was wrong. I was bound by love. Love for my brother. Love for this woman who sees beauty in broken things. Love for the possibility of something beautiful growing from tragedy. The light grew brighter, filling the room with warmth that seemed to push back the shadows and make everything seem more real, more vivid. Celeste hissed and backed toward the door, her vampire nature recoiling from the pure energy of their bond. "This isn't over," she snarled, her beautiful face twisted with rage and thwarted desire. "I will have what's mine. I will complete my collection." "No," Damien said quietly, moving to stand beside his brother. "You won't." For the first time in a century, the twins stood together, united against their common enemy. The sight was breathtaking. Two identical faces, one alive, one existing in the space between life and death, both blazing with determination and love. "You made us," Adrian said, his voice carrying new strength and authority. "But you don't own us. We choose our own path now, our own destiny." Celeste's form began to waver, as if the combined will of the brothers and the power of Maya's love was weakening her hold on the physical world. "This isn't possible," she whispered, her voice growing faint. "Many things are possible when love is involved," Maya said softly, her hand still clasped tightly in Adrian's. With a shriek of rage that seemed to shake the very walls of the mansion, Celeste dissolved into shadow, her presence vanishing from the house like smoke in the wind. The oppressive atmosphere that had filled the room lifted, leaving behind only the warm glow of candlelight and the sound of their breathing. The three of them stood in the sudden silence, the only sound the distant ticking of clocks and the whisper of wind through the eaves. Maya could feel the connection between herself and Adrian, humming with power, anchoring him to this world through bonds stronger than death itself. "Is she gone?" Maya asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "For now," Damien replied, his pale eyes still glowing with residual power. "But she'll be back. Vampires like Celeste don't give up easily, especially when they believe something belongs to them." "Then we'll face her together," Adrian said firmly, his form now completely solid and real. "All of us." Maya looked between the two brothers, her heart full of love and confusion in equal measure. "What happens now, I mean with us, with this?" She gestured to Adrian, to the impossible situation they found themselves in. Adrian's expression grew pained, and she could see the struggle in his pale eyes. "Maya, you must understand, I'm still dead. This connection we have, this anchor you've created, it's not the same as being truly alive. I exist in the space between worlds, and eventually that may not be enough. What if I don't want to let you go?" "Then you'll be trapped between worlds just as I am," Adrian said sadly, cupping her face in his hands that were now warm with borrowed life. "You deserve a real life, Maya, a life in the sunlight, with someone who can give you everything you need and deserve." "You give me everything I need," Maya protested, tears beginning to spill down her cheeks. "I give you shadows and borrowed time," Adrian said gently. "Damien can give you sunlight and eternity." Damien stepped forward, his expression conflicted and full of pain. "Adrian, you love her," Adrian said simply, turning to look at his brother. "I can see it in your eyes, in the way you look at her. And she cares for you too." Maya felt her heart breaking as she looked between the two men who had come to mean everything to her. "I love you both. How can I choose between you?" "Because one of us is alive," Adrian said gently, "and one of us exists only through your power and will." "But there might be another way," Maya said desperately, her mind racing for a solution. "The ritual Celeste mentioned would require your death," Adrian said firmly, his hands tightening on her face. "And I will never allow that. I would rather fade into nothingness than see you harmed. What if—" Maya's mind raced, grasping for possibilities she barely understood. "What if we modified the ritual? Instead of trading my life for yours, what if we shared it? What if we found a way to bind us together permanently?" Both brothers stared at her in shock, hope, and fear, warring in their identical faces. "Shared it," Damien repeated slowly. "I'm a medium," Maya explained, her words coming faster as the idea took shape. "My power comes from being able to bridge the gap between life and death. What if, instead of dying to bring Adrian back, I used that power to anchor him permanently to this world. Not alive exactly, but not gone either. A permanent bridge between life and death. That's never been attempted, Damien said slowly, his vampire mind already working through the possibilities and dangers. Because no one's ever had a medium powerful enough to try, Adrian added, hope creeping into his voice despite his obvious attempts to suppress it. It's dangerous, Damien warned, his protective instincts flaring. If something goes wrong, if the ritual fails, then we'll face it together, Maya said firmly, looking between the two brothers who had become her world. All three of us. Adrian shook his head, his expression tortured. I won't let you risk your life for me. I've already caused too much pain. It's not just for you, Maya said, reaching out to take both their hands. It's for us, for the chance to be together, to build something real and beautiful despite the impossible circumstances we find ourselves in. She looked between the two brothers, these men who had captured her heart in different but equally powerful ways. I love you both, she said simply, her voice strong despite the tears streaming down her face. Damien, you make me feel safe and cherished and desired. You show me a world of possibility and adventure. Adrian, you make me feel understood and whole and seen for who I really am. You understand the deepest parts of my soul. I don't want to choose between you. I want to find a way for all of us to be together. The brothers exchanged a long look, a century of shared memories and unspoken communication passing between them in a single glance. If we do this, Damien said slowly, his voice heavy with the weight of decision, there's no going back. We'd be bound together, all three of us, for eternity. Your life, your death, your very existence would be tied to ours. I can think of worse fates, Maya said with a watery smile. Adrian was quiet for a long moment, his pale eyes searching her face as if trying to memorize every detail. You're certain? A life shared between the living and the dead won't be easy. There will be challenges we can't even imagine. Nothing worthwhile ever is, Maya replied, her voice steady with conviction. As dawn approached, the three of them prepared for the ritual that would either bind them together forever or destroy them all. Maya had found references to similar ceremonies in the mansion's extensive library, ancient texts written in languages that predated modern civilization, speaking of binding spirits to the physical world through love and sacrifice and will. They gathered in the garden as the first hints of dawn began to touch the horizon, surrounded by moonflowers that bloomed only in darkness and would close their petals as soon as the sun rose. Maya sat in the center of a circle drawn with salt and silver, ancient symbols of protection and binding, while Damien and Adrian knelt on either side of her. Are you ready? Damien asked, his hand warm and solid in hers. Maya nodded, then turned to Adrian, whose hand was cool but growing warmer through their connection. Whatever happens, I want you to know, loving you, both of you, has been the greatest adventure of my life. Adrian smiled, the first truly peaceful expression she'd seen on his beautiful face since the night they met. And you, Maya Chen, have been my salvation. The ritual began at the stroke of dawn, as the sun's first rays touched the garden and the moonflowers began to close. Maya felt her power flowing outward, creating a bridge between the world of the living and the realm of the dead. It was like standing in a river of light, energy coursing through her in waves that seemed to reshape reality itself. Adrian's ghostly form began to stabilize, becoming more solid, more real with each passing moment, but instead of drawing life from Maya, the power seemed to be coming from their connection itself, the love that bound all three of them together, creating something entirely new. It's working, Damien breathed in wonder, his vampire senses picking up the shift in the supernatural energies around them. Maya felt a fundamental change occurring, not just in Adrian, but in all of them. The boundaries between life and death were blurring, creating something that had never existed before. A bond that transcended the normal rules of existence. The light grew brighter, encompassing all three of them in a cocoon of golden energy. Maya could feel Adrian's essence solidifying, becoming permanently anchored to the physical world through their love. But more than that, she could feel Damien's immortal nature extending to include her, sharing his eternal existence, while she shared her living warmth with Adrian. When the light finally faded, Adrian remained solid and real, though still carrying the ethereal quality that marked him as something beyond ordinary existence. But now that otherworldly nature felt like a gift rather than a curse, he existed in the space between life and death, able to touch both worlds. "How do you feel?" Maya asked, her voice hoarse from the energy that had flowed through her. Adrian flexed his fingers, marveling at their permanent solidity. "Different. Not alive exactly, but not gone either. I'm complete." "Anchored," Damien added, understanding dawning in his pale eyes. "To this world, to us, to existence itself." As the sun rose fully over the mansion, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, the three of them stood together in the garden. Maya was exhausted, but exhilarated, her heart full of love and infinite possibility. "What happens now?" she asked, looking between the two men who were now bound to her for eternity. "Now," Damien said, wrapping his arms around both of them, "we learn how to be a family." "An unusual family," Adrian added with a laugh that held more joy than Maya had ever heard from him. "The best kind," Maya said, leaning into their embrace. Epilogo. 1 year later, Maya stood in the main gallery of the Salem Museum of Fine Arts, watching as visitors moved through her first major solo exhibition. The paintings that lined the walls were unlike anything the art world had ever seen, works that seemed to pulse with supernatural energy, landscapes that shifted and changed depending on the light, portraits that captured not just physical features, but the very essence of their subjects' souls. "The critics are calling it transcendent," Damien said, appearing beside her with his characteristic silent grace. He wore an expensive black suit that had been tailored to perfection, and his pale eyes gleamed with pride as he watched people react to her work. "A new form of artistic expression that bridges the gap between the physical and metaphysical worlds," Adrian added, reading from a review on his phone. He looked more solid and present than ever, though he still carried that otherworldly quality that marked him as something beyond human. "I particularly like this one. Chen's work suggests the existence of realms beyond our ordinary perception, inviting viewers to question the very nature of reality itself." Maya smiled, her heart full as she looked at these two men who had become her world. Their arrangement was unconventional, certainly, but it worked for them in ways that continued to surprise and delight her. Damien provided stability and protection, his centuries of experience guiding them through the complexities of their supernatural existence. Adrian offered understanding and artistic inspiration, his unique perspective as someone who existed between worlds, enriching every aspect of their lives. "The gallery owner wants to discuss a permanent installation," Maya said, gesturing toward a distinguished-looking man in an expensive suit who kept glancing in their direction. "Something about creating a dedicated space for metaphysical art." "Are you interested?" Damien asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. "Maybe," Maya said thoughtfully, "but I think I prefer the freedom we have now, the ability to create without constraints, to explore whatever calls to us." Their life together had indeed been an exploration of possibilities that most people couldn't even imagine. Maya's art had flourished beyond her wildest dreams, infused with the supernatural energy that surrounded their unusual household. She painted landscapes that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, portraits that revealed the hidden depths of their subjects' souls, and abstract works that captured the very essence of love that transcended death itself. But more than professional success, she had found a happiness she'd never thought possible. Each day brought new discoveries about the nature of their bond, new ways that their love manifested in the physical world. Adrian could now exist comfortably in daylight, though he preferred the gentle light of dawn and dusk. Damien had found a peace he'd never known in his centuries of existence. The guilt and loneliness that had plagued him finally healed by the presence of his brother and the love of the woman who had made their reunion possible. "There's something we want to show you," Adrian said, exchanging a meaningful look with his brother. They led her through the gallery and out into the museum's sculpture garden, where the setting sun cast long shadows across carefully manicured lawns. In the center of the garden stood a new addition, a fountain topped with 3 figures whose hands were joined in an eternal circle. Maya gasped, recognizing the faces immediately. The sculpture depicted the three of them exactly as they were: Damien with his protective strength, Adrian with his ethereal beauty, and herself as the bridge that connected them. But it was more than just a physical representation. The artist had somehow captured the very essence of their bond, the love that had overcome death itself. "It's beautiful," she breathed, moving closer to examine the intricate details. "The artist is a friend of mine," Damien explained, "someone who understands the supernatural world and wanted to create something that honored what we've accomplished." "A monument to impossible love," Adrian added softly, "to the idea that some bonds are stronger than death itself." As they stood before the sculpture, Maya felt a familiar stirring in the air. She looked up to see a translucent figure watching them from across the garden, Celeste, or rather, what remained of her. The vampire's form was barely visible, more shadow than substance, her power broken by the love that bound the three of them together. "She's still watching," Maya observed, feeling no fear, only pity for the ancient creature who had never understood that love could not be owned or controlled. "Let her watch," Damien said calmly. "She can no longer touch what we have." "Some bonds," Adrian said softly, echoing words he'd spoken a year ago, "are stronger than death, stronger than time, stronger than any force that would try to break them." The ghostly image of Celeste flickered once more and then faded completely, leaving only the warm light of the setting sun and the sound of water flowing from the fountain. Maya returned to studying the sculpture, noting how the artist had captured not just their physical forms, but the energy that flowed between them. In the stone faces, she could see the journey they'd taken, from tragedy to love, from separation to unity, from the impossible to the inevitable. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked quietly. "The choice we made? The life we've built?" "Never," both brothers said simultaneously, their voices blending in perfect harmony. "How could we regret finding each other?" Damien added, his arm tightening around her waist. "How could we regret love that conquered death itself?" Adrian said, his hand finding hers and squeezing gently. As the sun set over Salem, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold, the three souls who had found each other against all odds stood together before their monument. They had faced the impossible and emerged victorious, not through violence or power, but through love that refused to be bound by the ordinary rules of existence. Maya thought about the young woman who had arrived at the mansion a year ago, desperate and alone, with nothing but her art and her dreams. That woman could never have imagined the life she now lived, the love she had found, the family she had created from the ashes of tragedy. "What's next for us?" she asked, looking between the two men who were now bound to her for eternity. "Whatever we choose," Damien said with a smile that held centuries of possibility. "Whatever calls to us," Adrian added, his eyes bright with the joy of someone who had been given a second chance at existence. "Together," Maya said firmly, and it was both a statement and a promise. As night fell around them, the three of them made their way back to the mansion that had become their sanctuary, their home, their haven in a world that would never fully understand what they had accomplished. But understanding wasn't necessary. Love was enough, had always been enough, would always be enough. In the end, Maya reflected as they walked through the garden where moonflowers were beginning to bloom. That was the only truth that really mattered. Love that transcended death, love that conquered impossibility, love that created new realities from the force of its own existence. And in the mansion where it all began, surrounded by the art that captured their supernatural bond and the music that expressed their deepest emotions, three souls continued their eternal dance, bound together by love that would never fade, never falter, never end. What an incredible journey Maya, Damien, and Adrian took us on. From that first mysterious night in the mansion to the beautiful, impossible love story that unfolded, this tale proves that sometimes the most extraordinary relationships are born from the most unlikely circumstances. The way love literally conquered death itself gives me chills every single time. I have to ask, which brother captured your heart more? Team Damien with his protective vampire strength and centuries of wisdom, or Team Adrian with his haunting vulnerability and artistic soul? And what did you think of Maya's choice to bind them all together, rather than choosing between them? If you enjoyed this supernatural romance that pushed every boundary of what love can accomplish, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Your support means everything and helps me bring you more captivating tales that explore the depths of impossible love. Drop a comment below and tell me, do you believe love can truly transcend death? Would you have made the same choice as Maya, risking everything to save both brothers? And which moment hit you hardest, Adrian's sacrifice, the revelation of his ghostly existence, or that final binding ritual? Next week, I'll be sharing another spine-tingling romance that will leave you breathless. The Demon King's bride was his greatest enemy's daughter. She had 30 days to kill him before their wedding night. Trust me, you won't want to miss that emotional roller coaster of forbidden love and deadly secrets. Until then, keep believing in love that defies every rule and creates its own reality.